Thank you. So my colleagues and I got the fat and happy and in a food coma time slot, so we'll do our best to try to keep this invigorating. So my name is Sean Arena. I am the commercial director for Sabre, specifically Sabre Travel Network. And I'm here today to basically cover with you what we've done as of late in building an end-to-end developer platform for the travel industry. So who we are. Just to put it bluntly, many people have not heard of Sabre. We're probably one of the largest technology companies you have never heard of. We are a global travel marketplace that connects travel buyers and sellers. So over 400 airlines, 125,000 hotel properties, dozens of tour operators, or hundreds of tour operators, dozens of car rental companies, cruise lines, rail carriers, all connecting to over 400,000 travel agencies. We provide software solutions to all these constituents. Many are actually, we house their reservation systems as well and provide software or APIs to them as well as to others beyond the industry, which I'll talk about briefly. In terms of scale, if you can imagine, having this kind of a marketplace generates a lot of traffic. So actually at peak times, over 100,000 messages per second. 1.1 trillion messages were actually transacted through Sabre in 2013, and over $110 billion sold through our network, which is a pretty staggering stat if you think about it. So with that, we've had throughout the years many different types of services that we expose to the industry, many different areas of the company providing different types of documentation for developers. We really sat back and said, how can we create an end-to-end developer experience that targets not only our existing customers, but opens up the door to new types of customers? So with Sabre Dev Studio, which you may or may not have heard of, we launched in May. We actually rolled out a new platform that provides open access to all of our APIs, as well as different types of prototype galleries for developers to test with, documentation, a sandbox to go play with the APIs, build your own prototypes. So why did we do it? Well, transactions through our system and just the industry at large are growing exponentially. So the online travel market is actually growing at 2 to 3 times the industry as a whole in travel, which is contributing to an explosion in not only API usage, but API creation. There's a proliferation of different types of travel sites out there, mobile apps that drives more shopping activity. On average, a traveler will go to 10 different sites, 32 visits total per trip, which is pretty staggering if you think about it and what that ultimately creates in terms of a downline impact. There's a rise of new entrants and competitors. I've said in many different speeches, there's a blurring I would see between, or a three-way collision of search, social, and retail. Many of you probably are seeing the same. And we needed to move faster to keep up with the pace of the developer community. Faster access, easier experience, faster APIs, new types of services, new types of capabilities to expose to the travel industry, as well as diversify revenue. So it wasn't, ironically, the title of the PowerPoint is ahead of the next booking. But a lot of the services we expose create new opportunities that actually may not drive a booking or a booking fee. We actually unbundle services for various purposes in and outside of the industry. So as you can imagine, conceptualizing Dev Studio from end to end within an organization of 10,000 employees worldwide and hundreds, if not at times thousands, of developers accessing our system was no small feat. So how did we do it? Well, I'm going to go through here some high-level best practices and lessons learned that I came up with. Hopefully, some will be insightful. Some may just be a validation of where you already are, depending upon your span or point in time in the life cycle of delivering an open developer platform for your business. So with that, we'll start with the obvious one with a slight twist. So pick an executive believer. And what I mean by that is we've all had projects where you have an executive sponsor. I'm not talking about somebody where you can go for checkpoints and feedback and they can help you manage steering committee meetings. I'm talking about picking somebody that has a fundamental understanding of the underlying infrastructure of your business, the data assets that you have, how you can actually expose those into new services. In our case, actually, I partnered with our chief scientist at Sabre, who has a team of PhDs in mathematics that build the algorithms that actually derive low-fare shopping on a massive scale. And so coming up with new concepts with him was very invigorating and exciting, and he was just an earshot from the other executives, as you can imagine, and was a great advocate for getting this platform off the ground. Back to my point on these new concepts, I've been known to say if a picture can say 1,000 words, a prototype can say 1,000,000. So we actually spent weeks working on different kinds of concepts using nascent services as well as existing services to demonstrate the possibilities of prototype or applications that can be built within the industry that have never been thought of before at sub-second response times through new channels as well as existing channels. And we got a lot of traction in doing so. Actually, in fact, many of those prototypes we've since ported into the Dev Studio now as part of our gallery for others to use and consume and repurpose for their own use. Number 2, so look beyond your industry. There's a lot of great cases to bolster your point in terms of coming up with a developer platform. Amazon obviously pioneered many aspects of platform as a service, software as a service. Bloomberg actually had some great innovations in terms of a freemium model for APIs. Apple obviously raised the bar with an SDK in terms of how to wrap an app into their ecosystem. And to connect the dots, it's really important to understand who created the dots. I've said that before. A couple cases in point. Ray Kurzweil, some of you may have heard of him. He's actually right now the director of engineering for Google. He actually has been purported to have an accuracy rate of 86% in forecasting technology trends, which may be debatable, but even if it was 50%, that would be pretty astounding. Well, why would he be so accurate? Well, he was the inventor of the flatbed scanner, the first print-to-speech reading machine, the first commercial text-to-speech synthesizer, the first commercially marketed large vocabulary speech recognition system. So clearly he has his hands on a lot of things that he, in fact, created. And from that perspective, it's actually really easy for him to probably pontificate and speculate where things might be headed. More close to home for us, actually, one of our employees, former employees, was the co-founder of XML. So clearly, talking to him, we got lots of insights around where APIs may be headed, what we might need to be thinking about, and was in fact instrumental in helping us put us to where we are today and position us for the future. We also, from an API perspective, take an inside-out, outside-in approach in terms of conceptualizing and designing them. What I mean by that is you have to envision first a great user experience that these APIs can enable. A lot of companies falter by creating APIs in a vacuum, exposing them, hope for the best. So we do spend a lot of time on that, but we also spend a lot of time on the other end, looking at really valuable user experience interfaces and functions on a site that may very well be a valuable API to expose. So that 360 view is critical in terms of how you come up with new concepts for APIs. So that also you need to think about a philosophical shift. This one's a hard one for a lot of companies. When we launched, we actually had several competitors on our site, testing, poking around. Was it uncomfortable for someone in our company? Sure, but again, we were touting an open system, and that's where we are. Also, to be an open platform, you have to recognize that others can and will innovate in ways that you may not have thought of or considered, and be comfortable with that. From a product perspective, especially in their product marketing teams, that may be very challenging because if it's a great idea, I want to own it, I want to build it, but it also can bolster a lot of new business development opportunities. There are actually an estimated 20 million plus developers or programmers in the world. That's a big opportunity. In the past 8 years alone in travel, over $4.8 billion in venture capital has been invested in over 750 startups. No internal development team, no matter how good, can keep up with that pace. And I think too many companies actually make the mistake of treating the developer space as an afterthought and not a true customer segment. A great developer experience really can be a competitive differentiator. Look at companies like Swipe and Elasticsearch, for instance. 4, it's not a bad thing if it benefits your current customers, but don't make it all about that or vice versa. Really what I mean by that is you need to strike a balance between fostering new business opportunities, but also making sure that you can continue to serve your new customers with new kinds of value-added APIs. Don't get trapped into an isolationist business case if you're targeting new emerging businesses with the greenfield hockey stick, but at the same time, don't bury the new capabilities and the business case into your existing product plan to make it all about your existing customers. If you can help your existing customers, in Sabre's case, for instance, the online travel agencies of the world, the B2B developers creating apps for the world, while also demonstrating your ability to grow in new areas, in our case with meta search engines, with social sites and startups, that's a win-win for the business. And it's not as easy as it sounds. So ready, set, wait. Test early, often proof points really do matter. So from usability to exploring cert-based APIs and exposing them, to signing new customers, don't wait till everything is 100% buttoned up. The more success you can prove early on, the better. We were actually executing agreements, unbundling existing services, targeting new types of customers well before we had everything in place to launch Sabre Dev Studio. Was it unnerving to some? Yes. But did it help us have a higher performing team when we pulled the trigger and went live with everything? You bet. So in this world, speed truly wins. It's not just a matter of having the best technology and pricing. That certainly helps. But there are often times who can get a customer up and running the fastest is going to win the business. So take that in mind. So don't get married to the business model day one. So for those of you that are really just starting in terms of thinking about a new open platform or developer platform for your industry or your customers, think about it in a holistic context. So Rich Barton, former CEO of Expedia, he's actually created new ventures such as Zillow. You probably have heard of him. And I'm paraphrasing, once said, get the product right, the business model will follow. So we actually started with 14 to 15 different business models that we theorized could be successful. But after several conversations with customers, testing them, actually even signing certain agreements, 2 to 3 actually bubbled to the surface and stuck. And that's actually what we've gone out with in terms of our market launch. And it really wasn't rocket science. It's a bit of competitive intelligence, a bit of market feedback, a bit of internal modeling, just triangulating between what your customers and prospects think would work for them, what you would need to be profitable and sustainable, and what you're actually able to even support from a billing, contractual, tracking perspective. So expose anything that slows you down early and often. So my favorite quote in life is, "Nothing in human progress is achieved with unanimous consent." That's actually a Christopher Columbus quote. But with so many moving parts to this project, so many interrelated pieces, you can't afford to let any component get you hung up or it automatically becomes a snowball effect, especially with a company as big as ours with very intricate as well as interconnected systems, exposing new types of services. We needed to be loud and fast in terms of how we got things done. If you ever, and on the flip side, just from a marketing perspective, if you ever want a barometer of the level of bureaucracy within your own company, launch, and some of you probably have already done this, but launch a major external hack event at your campus. We actually learned quite a bit recently when we launched our first major external hack day event. We've done several internal. But just, you would not believe some of the things that we ran into in terms of Wi-Fi connections. We had 60+ participants. Facilities was worried about that. It was on a weekend. It was a 24-hour hack day on a Saturday. But we have 3,000 people connecting to our Wi-Fi networks on a given business day. Why are you worried about 60 people on a weekend? Paying for air conditioning that weekend. Oh, we want to move the foosball table in for the hackers when they're in their off time. Well, that's going to void the warranty. We had an open bar for a bit at the opening. Worried about people drinking. Well, first of all, it's a hack day for 24 hours. Most of them, if not all of them, were spending the night. Secondly, they're there to hack or to code. They're not there to get drunk. And frankly, there are probably more Sabre people there drinking than developers. So we actually wanted a cash prize as well, to give a cash prize, and we did. But explaining that to our administration that's responsible for the legality behind it, saying, okay, we want to get $5,000 in 20s wrapped up in a silver briefcase from the bank. They're looking at you like you're crazy. But anyway, we got it done, but it was actually a great learning experience just in terms of the types of challenges, even very minute probably in retrospect, just to help you get faster and move more quickly across different aspects of your company. So, number 8, there's no such thing as a shared resource. I would love to say this to every VP, senior VP, CEO that may be in the room. In the context of what we did and what you may be doing, think about that in terms of if you really are dedicated to getting an open developer platform off the ground with new types of services, a new business model, a whole new marketing effort behind it. It's very unrealistic to expect I'm going to take 50% of this person's time, 20% of this person's time. Myself personally, when we launched Sabre Dev Studio, I was our head of North America marketing. I had a big team, lots of responsibility. They pulled me off for 18 months, along with a dedicated development team and some other folks. I had some business development people. We got some great proof points. We actually built out the infrastructure, and we launched. But if that had been a part-time job across all of our areas, we would still be talking about it. So pick your partners. You can't do everything on your own. Could we have built our own API management platform? Yes. Would it have slowed us down? Yes. Would it have probably cost us more? Yes. Was that our core competency? No. So we looked where we could fill the gaps with partners, such as Mashery. Another example, did we need a developer community? Yes, we had one actually built internally for our current developer partners, but it didn't have all the functionality we needed. We wanted to target a broader audience of developers out there, so we partnered with GitHub. It was just a more logical choice. So lastly, walk the walk. This is not an if you build it, they will come story. The culture, the marketing efforts, the business processes within your organization really need to adapt to a new way of doing things. Funny story, so one of our first customers that we landed when we had launched Sabre Dev Studio, or actually prior to it, was a company by the name of Hipmunk, very innovative meta search engine on the West Coast. I was in there in a business development capacity, dressed down, I thought, to meet with their startup culture-like framework, much like I am today. The first words out of their mouth when I walked in the door, oh, the suits are here. So, I mean, just again, having to relate to a new type of audience and targeting a new type of audience takes a lot more than just clever presentations and wording. You have to really walk the walk. Usability feedback. For the first time, we actually had developers testing our experience, and you heard in a previous speech about the DX. I can tell you, as a user persona, between consumers and agencies, developers are an entirely different breed, and you probably heard that. We heard a lot of, what is this marketing fluff, get this crap off the page, I just want to go in and do my work, show me where to go, keep it simple. And that's actually translated as well to a degree within our marketing efforts with the developer community. So if you throw a bunch of bullets up on an API, or a bunch of bullets up about APIs in your PowerPoint, what's coming, what exists today, you're not only going to lose developers, you're going to lose the business people as well. We focus on really keeping it simple. We use a lot of illustrations to articulate how APIs can be used. And that goes works far better, I should say, than reading a list of bullets around what the functionality is of all these new services that you may be exposing. Be where they are. So we went to lots of new events, we still do. Different social channels. We're not just targeting new customers, we're actually targeting new ecosystems. We're talking to incubators, accelerators, universities, venture capital firms, angel investors. So really looking at a broader ecosystem requires a much broader effort. And then finally, just to wrap up, so back to the story on the hack day, we knew we were doing something right when with our hackathon, the Dev Studio participants, 90% were actually non-travel people, had no travel background. That actually was a very good thing. We got a lot of great feedback. And in fact, another surprising point within that hack day was that the winners of our hack day were actually teenagers. I don't even know how old they were, but they certainly weren't at the open bar. Let's just say that. So it was a very insightful experience, and we'll be doing many more to come. So just to summarize, Initially, really, our success for Dev Studio was directional as we targeted new markets, tried new business models, launched new products. But over time, we got a lot higher fidelity around those metrics. We've actually deployed real-time campaign analytics to understand what marketing vehicles are working, our usage and adoption stats. We're getting much more accurate around how we can dial things back and forth or up or down and learn what's really moving traffic. Since our launch, and you may have read this in one of the blogs that we had posted recently, we've actually had 1,450 users register for the site and over 26,000 site visits. For a B2B developer space, that's pretty incredible. So, and that's since May. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So the first one being, you mentioned this concept of moving beyond sort of an executive sponsor to more of an evangelist style role. Does that person have to be a technology person, or can it be any type of executive in the company?
That's a good question. I would say it helps. It helps because they understand the current constraints you're faced with, and they also, like in our case, had a very profound understanding of the underlying data structure and what could be exposed and how it could be exposed. So when we were working together on new ideas and concepts, you had that practical balance with him to know what was even feasible versus somebody on the business side who may think of a great idea, but then when you talk to the tech teams, they say, well, it's going to take 6 months to even come up with a prototype. So,
so that technology background helps.
Yes.
It probably would help to also have somebody on the executive side, but definitely have somebody that understands what's going on with the technology. Okay, you talked a little bit about this, but I wonder if you have any more color or context. We've talked a lot about the developer landscape and creating a developer user experience. What does it mean to you to create a good developer user experience? Because I think it's sort of an afterthought for a lot of people that put together API strategies.
That's a good question. So we kind of have 3 guiding principles for our developer experience. It needs to be fast, flexible, and future-proof. So fast meaning how you can access it, how you can get to the information, and how you can spin up new prototypes. Flexible meaning that the services are very open, but also structured in a way that you can do mashups in a much more efficient manner. And then future-proof, although that's slightly a marketing slang word, but or term. But we have a lot of older APIs, but we also have a lot of newer APIs, and we wanted to pick partners as well as build out the technology to where, for instance, a developer building a next-gen mobile app knows that what we're exposing to them won't put them out of date in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. So.
Great. And last, final, quick question. So we talked a lot about what you're doing externally for developers. How are you using APIs internally? What's that strategy look like for you?
Absolutely. In fact, it's funny you mentioned that. So we actually have a graphics. We have a lot of software solutions for our travel agency customers under the banner of Sabre Red, which is a portfolio of software solutions and services for our travel agency customers that we market to. Dev Studio is basically a sister brand to that, and we oftentimes internally and externally demonstrate how a lot of our own products in Sabre Red that our agency customers use were built using Sabre Dev Studio. So you have that connection where you can show that not only are they externally consumable, but to put it crudely, we eat our own dog food as well.
Brilliant. Well, let's give a round of applause for Sean Arena. Pleasure. Thank you for having me.